time a disaster unfolds in the Western Ghats, like the landslides in Wayanad now, there are hectic discussions on the Madhav Gadgil report. In fact, that's perhaps the only time that there is some public discourse about a report prepared 13 years ago and discarded. Hello, I'm Dhanya Rajendran and I'm hosting the Let Me Explain show this week. My colleague Pooja Prasanna will be back from next week onwards. In this episode, we will look at why the Madhav Gadgil Committee was formed and what the report said. We'll also discuss why people living along the Ghats and almost all political parties have opposed the report, and whether there is a middle path that needs to be urgently adopted. Before we go further into the episode, let me remind you that my colleagues Shabir Ahmed, Harita John, Cora Abraham and Maria Teresa Raju have been reporting out of Wayanad, bringing you stories of devastation and how people are really coping with the tragedy. Let me also remind you that this reporting would not have been possible if not for the support of our readers. So do subscribe to the News Minute because we are a platform which does not have any advertisements. If you're already a subscriber, then do contribute to our reporting fund. To study the impact of population pressure, climate change, and developmental activities in the Western Ghats, the Ministry of Environment in 2010 formed the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel WGEEP, popularly known as the Gadgil Committee. The Western Ghats is a 1,490 km long mountain range running along the western coast of the country, covering 6 states: Karnataka, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. It is home to hundreds of threatened flora and fauna. About 60% of this mountain range is in Karnataka. The panel under Ecologist Madhav Gadgil gave its report to the Union government in August 2011. So what did the Madhav Gadgil panel say? It basically demarcated regions into ecologically sensitive zones, or ESZ. Zone 1 was of highest sensitivity. Zone 2 was regions of high sensitivity, and regions of moderate sensitivity were grouped as Zone 3. The panel made very specific recommendations as to what activities can be allowed and what will be prohibited in each of these zones. It also wanted the creation of an overarching ecological authority for the region called the Western Ghats Ecology Authority, or WGEA. The panel looked at 142 taluks across 6 states, and as you can see in this table, these taluks were marked as Zone 1. Maharashtra had the highest, and then came Karnataka. In Wayanad, Vaitiri and Manandavadi taluks were to be classified as Zone 1. The devastating landslides that killed more than 300 people this time happened in the Vaitiri taluk. Lesser number of taluks were designated as Zone 2. The highest this time is in Karnataka. The Gadgil panel wanted areas to be marked as eco-sensitive zones 1, 2 or 3. What's the problem with that, right? The reason why the report faced protests was because of the restrictions it advocated in each of these zones. Let me quickly go through the restrictions in Zone 1 and 2 because these were the most controversial. First, it said there can be no change in land use. That is, forest land could not be used for non-forest purposes. Agricultural land could not be used for non-agricultural purposes. The only exception was when existing village areas had to be expanded due to an increase in population. The report said that for existing built structures like hotels or resorts, a refined tourism policy has to be evolved. Road and other infrastructural expansion plans had to undergo an environmental impact assessment. No hazardous or toxic waste processing plants were to be allowed. In Zone 1, all chemical pesticides and weedicides were to be phased out in 5 years, while Zone 2 would get 8 years. No new licenses were to be given for mining, quarrying and sand mining. Illegal mining and quarrying had to be stopped immediately in both the zones. In Zone 1, wherever mining already existed, it was to be phased out in 5 years. In Zone 2, existing mining would have to adopt good practices and be under strict regulation. There were a few more restrictions that this panel put across. Both zones were not supposed to have any new polluting industries of the red and orange category, and existing industries were to switch to zero pollution. no forest clearance or stream diversion for new projects, no new thermal power plants, no large-scale wind power projects, no new railway lines and major roads, except where it is highly essential, like in Goa. In all the zones, genetically modified crops were not to be allowed and use of plastic was to be banned. New highways and expressways had to be avoided according to the committee. The report also said that monoculture plantations like tea, coffee and cardamom needs to integrate with more indigenous crops, especially food crops and fruiting trees. The Madhav Gadgil panel faced protests across all the 6 states through which the Western Ghats run. The protests were so severe that in August 2012, then Environment Minister Jayanti Natarajan constituted another panel under former ISRO chief Dr. K Kasturirangan. The Kasturirangan report got around 1,800 responses, and guess what? 81% were against the Gadgil recommendations. While the Gadgil panel had recommended broad ESZs, the Kasturirangan committee proposed ESAs, or ecologically sensitive areas. One village was to be categorized as one unit of ESAs. Gadgil wanted 70% of the Western Ghats to be declared ESZs. The Kasturirangan committee report marked only 37% of the Western Ghats to come under ESAs. The Kasturirangan panel gave restrictions on 5 categories. Some were different from the Gadgil report. No mining, quarrying and sand mining, and no thermal power plants. The same recommendations. When it came to industries, Kasturirangan did not want red category polluting industries. This is an important difference because Gadgil wanted both red and orange category banned. The Kasturirangan committee also said no building and construction projects of 20,000 square meter area should be allowed. And finally, no buildings, townships and area development projects in the area could come up which was above 50 hectares. Both the reports have been opposed in all the 6 states. In Kerala specifically, the Congress and the CPIM were against it, though of course there were individual leaders in both these parties who supported the reports. The Syro-Malabar Catholic Church opposed the report. A large number of farmers in this region are members of this church. This powerful church at one point even suggested that there was an international conspiracy behind the Gadgil report. The church spearheaded a group called the High Range Protection Forum, which led the protests in places like Wayanad and Idukki. The opposition was that people would lose their livelihoods, that there would be no development and the state would face a power crisis. The BJP in Kerala supported the Gadgil report, but in Kerala the BJP really has no stake. However, in neighbouring Karnataka, where the BJP has formed the government multiple times, it opposed the report. In 2022, then Chief Minister Basavaraja Bommai even led a delegation to Delhi to oppose the implementation of the Kasturirangan report. The story is the same across all the states. On July 31, 2024, the Union government published a draft notification suggesting that nearly 57,000 square kilometres of the Ghats should be demarcated as ecologically sensitive areas. The discussions will begin soon on this notification. But looking at the past history, it is unlikely that there will be any political consensus. After the recent landslides in Wayanad, many experts have stated that the landslides in itself were a natural phenomenon caused due to excessive rainfall in an area with fractured rocks. But the damage because of the landslides were more severe due to the human settlements in these areas. So what really can be the middle path? There have been many myths about the Gadgil report. For example, people thought that it completely bans coffee, tea, cardamom plantations and that those living in ESA villages would be displaced. That's not true. If there has to be any kind of consensus, then the government will have to speak to stakeholders and people will have to be convinced that a middle ground somehow has to be adopted. This is the 6th time that the draft re-notification has been reissued. That shows that even consecutive union governments are not ready to weather the political backlash that such laws will bring in. The lack of strong political will to finalize the ESA would be disastrous for the region, especially in the wake of extreme rainfall and landslides that we've already witnessed. So let's hope there is some middle ground that is achieved, and that's the end of Let Me Explain. Thank you for joining us, and let me remind you, our reporters have been in Wayanad and bringing you reports about the kind of devastation there. That would not have been possible if not for our subscribers and readers. So do become a paid subscriber of the News Minute, support our journalism. If you're already a subscriber, then you can definitely contribute to our reporting fund. Thank you and keep watching.